For new teachers, sometimes things can get a bit bumpy throughout the course of that first year. When this happens, it's not usually because they don't understand the content they're trying to teach or that they don't have effective strategies to teach that content. Most of the time, college programs do a fairly good job of preparing teachers in these areas. When new teachers struggle, it's usually when students are showing negative behaviors and the adults just aren't sure how to make this stop. This makes sense since you won't have had many opportunities to lead groups of students on your own, even after completing your field experiences during student teaching. The reality is that you won't get much experience with that until you're in front of your own classroom. The most important thing to do before being able to turn around negative behaviors, though, is to understand what students are telling us when they show them. All behavior you see in the classroom, or anywhere for that matter, is a form of communication. Once you start from that perspective, then you can begin to think about why a particular student is doing what they're doing. Whenever you observe student behaviors, these happen because they serve a purpose for that child. We can put the reasons why they're showing these behaviors into 4 big buckets. These are referred to as the 4 functions of behavior, and they include the following: task avoidance, which is also referred to as escape; attention seeking; access to preferred tasks or things; and then sensory input. Knowing which bucket each of the specific behaviors falls is important because it can help inform the steps we take to help students make the changes needed. So let's take a look at each of these and think about why they're important and what they might look like in the classroom setting. Escape or task avoidance behaviors occur when students begin acting out because they don't want to complete a particular task. This is not at all difficult to spot, but the important thing is to determine what the reason is for the student trying to avoid assigned tasks. Once you know what's driving the behavior, you're much more likely to succeed in intervening and helping the student change it. For example, if we're able to determine that the tasks being assigned are just too difficult for the student, or if the student perceives they're too difficult, that could result in shutting down out of frustration or a fear of taking risks as a learner. If the task is too easy, then it's possible for a lack of motivation to be a factor. Other areas to consider are whether or not the avoidance is connected to a particular subject area, time of day. You might see acting out behaviors in an effort to avoid particular types of tasks. When this happens, it's not at all uncommon for the student to go with an adult to take a break or speak with an administrator. It's important to be aware, though, that no matter what, when the student returns and the appropriate supports are in place, the student needs to complete the assigned task or some portion of it before going on to do something else. Otherwise, their efforts to avoid specific tasks are being reinforced, even though that's not your intent. Another common cause of student behavior problems in class is when they're seeking attention. The irony is that the approach most of us take when a student seeking attention acts out usually results in getting even more of the behavior. Even though we don't mean to reinforce the behavior, you'll quite often see a student constantly having all eyes turned toward them as the teachers call out their name over and over and over. With this type of situation, it's often helpful to redirect within the flow of the learning using nonverbal cueing, or perhaps circulating closer to the student to discreetly redirect them. It's also important to think about ways this student can have opportunities to be the center of attention at different points during the day, but within the flow of the learning where it's acceptable to you as the adult in the room. Teachers accomplish this in many creative ways. Some have these students help with morning announcements from the office. Maybe they can share a joke of the day in front of the class. Even more powerful, though, might be that if they know you take 3 or 4 minutes out of your time each day to simply talk to them about how things are going with them. Not necessarily as a learner, but as a person. There's no one-size-fits-all approach with this, and sometimes you'll need to try several things before stumbling upon one that works. At times, you'll also see behaviors that are being caused by students' need for sensory input. This may be related to a particular disability, but it also might not be. For some students, this might show itself when a student seeks to block their ears when they feel things are too noisy for them. For others, it might be a behavior you can see from what they're doing with their hands or with their feet. For any behavioral concerns you have that might be related to a child's sensory needs, this is a great time to consult with the school's occupational therapist. They have expertise in this area and should be willing to directly observe the student and provide some specific practices you can put in place to help meet that student's needs while helping them function comfortably within the learning environment. The fourth function of behavior you need to be aware of is when a student is trying to gain access to something tangible, something they really want to do or have. It might be that they want their turn during a game, or the opportunity to use the computer, or maybe the use of a specific swing that another child's using. If they don't control their impulses, it can often result in them pushing another child away from what they want, or maybe showing anger to get what they want. If those negative behaviors result in them getting access to whatever it is they're trying to get access to, that will deepen the behavior going forward. So if you think gaining access is something that's driving a particular set of negative behaviors, then there's a need to have a conversation about how they can still do or get that thing without being disruptive. Maybe it's that we schedule when they'll have access and they know when that is. Or maybe it's that we're working with the student on appropriate ways to ask for a turn. Whatever it takes, the goal is to replace the negative behavior with ones that will result in more positive outcomes for everyone. So those are the four functions of behavior, and by understanding what they are, you'll stand a much better chance of intervening when you see that a student is struggling.
To learn more about how to put your best foot forward, go to bestfootforwardforteachers.com.